FM News Talk 97.1. On-demand audio.
Now, I feel an obligation, not pressure, but obligation, to make sure that we're in close consultation with the Israelis on these issues because it affects them deeply. They're one of our closest allies in the region, and we've got an Iranian regime that has said horrible things that directly threaten Israel's existence.
But it's just noise, right? It's just all that noise. This is the president. This interview that he gave with 60 Minutes was very revealing. And it was very bad for his campaign. I think as bad as the interview that he gave to Univision as well. It just makes them look unbelievably incompetent. And for all of our, of course, our national, our foreign policy issues, we're going to talk to our expert on the issue. Stephen Yates is a foreign policy expert with the D.C. International Advisory, former advisor to former VP Dick Cheney. Stephen, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Dana. Great to be back with you.
We have a brigadier general in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, according to Reuters, who says that Iran is basically preparing a preemptive strike against Israel and American bases. But, according to the president, this probably is just noise, I'm sure. Is this are they at the level where they could actually successfully carry something like this out, or is this just them attempting to bait us and or Israel into being the preemptive actors in this?
Well, unfortunately, when you run for office and become commander-in-chief, you don't get to know the answer to those questions until it's too late in
Right.
most cases. So really, your only responsibility is to lead and seek to shape the calculus of people in a region to reassure, hopefully, your allies and make others worry that if they thought they had that option, they better not do it unless they're prepared to forsake all in the process. And so, really, when you dealt with things in the Cold War, you had a balance of terror in some ways. And currently, the president just seeks to sort of withdraw and appease and then try to conduct a revolution here at home. And so I think he's got this distant Joe Cool attitude to foreign policy that I think just does not deter those who are determined to reshape the Middle East.
And I was reading an article with the National Journal this morning that discussed how essentially when the president when he took office, as part of his foreign policy maneuvering, he took any discussion of containment concerning Iran off of the table, which has basically contributed to why we seem to be so impotent when going up and even just discussing, even in the rhetoric, against them right now. This apparently still seems to be the case in terms of the United States' perspective towards Iran. I don't think anything has changed. How do you interpret all of this?
Well, I think if you want to have a very stern sobriety check, take a look at a map that goes where these various demonstrations have taken place. And you see an arc that goes all the way across northern Africa, through the Middle East, all the way across South Asia into Southeast Asia. And what do all of these places have in common but violent majority Muslim populations at present? And so really, in terms of containment, there's the containment of Iran and Iran's nuclear program that's absolutely high priority national security interest. But a broader genie has been out of the bottle, and the Obama administration has done worse than nothing about it. They seem to actually be facilitating it by their complacency.
Exactly. And this consulate torching in Benghazi, one of the things that the CIA has been saying this morning in the New York Times is that this has been they called it a catastrophic loss of intelligence that could not have come at a worse time. And this, coupled with how CBS News reported that this isn't even really being investigated as a crime scene, the leftovers, I guess, the remains of the consulate. So it seems as though the administration is they're still not doing anything proactive or even reactive in Libya in terms of this loss.
I think that there is an absolute fundamental point here. So many years after the last election, we still have an administration that treats terrorism as a law enforcement exercise. These were terrorists. These were international terrorists that engaged in a successful act of terrorism against U.S. assets and personnel. This is not a case where you read Miranda or send in crime scene investigators. It's an act of war.
Right.
And it should have been treated that way. I mean, really, the White House and the State Department have got into this exceedingly farcical but really offensive exchange about whether it was right to get a journal of the ambassador. But why the heck was anyone able to get that journal? What else were people able to pick through before the CNN folks picked that up days after the event? I mean, really, They just have not taken terrorism or Islamist radicalism seriously.
And wouldn't the terrorists that attacked this consulate, they had to, because I had read that it wasn't made public that this ambassador was there or that anyone was really there, and they didn't know where the safe house was or anything like that. That their security, it seems to me, has already been breached because someone on the inside had to have tipped them off.
Yes, I mean, very, very clearly there was a compromise in the system. I mean, anytime you end up with this tragic of an outcome, it's sort of like a patient doesn't die just by accident. So there very, very clearly were problems. Where the culpability lies ultimately, I mean, Libya is a much more mixed situation than, say, with Egypt, where the top of the government is ideologically completely in sync with these aggressive anti-American stands. Libya is a little bit more complicated, but just as dangerous.
Yes. Well, and this is something that this administration has had so many problems with. I mean, not just here with the intelligence that's been lost, because that's a great point, too. I mean, what was picked over before CNN found the journal that was just laying on the ground there and took that and gave it to the Stevens family? I mean, what else was grabbed there? This coupled with the numerous times that this administration has bungled missions, that there was a mission that affected Israel as well, that they're just very, it doesn't seem that they care so much about intelligence like this, and they don't realize the importance, or maybe they just don't care that it has in missions overseas. I'm not quite sure what to make of this. Is this just what happens when you elect someone that has zero foreign policy credibility or even understanding of it?
Well, I think, it's very, very hard to watch these things and not sense that there's a great deal of incompetence and ideology that stands in the way of common sense and really operational responsibility. With Secretary Clinton, couldn't have been in more irrelevant places over the last several weeks as these situations boil out of control. She's traveling around multiple different geographies, and yet we have this train wreck of a UN ambassador who goes on television and lies to the American people about the nature of these attacks. Really, Hillary was going to be the one that a lot of conservatives and Republicans might not have liked, but it could at least respect. But there seems to be no level of incompetence that this administration can't reach when it comes to these international issues.
And he says that basically the concerns Israel has on Iran's nuclear capabilities, that's just noise. And instead of meeting with any world leaders at the UN General Assembly, which I don't want to give any kind of legitimacy to the United Nations, but you have a number of world leaders who are in town. Instead of meeting with any of them, he decides instead to go on The View. It almost seems like they're purposefully orchestrating it to be as ridiculous as it is.
Well, they're achieving that if that's their objective, because it really is. If you have respect for the office and you have respect for the responsibilities, the president's time is scarce and the responsibilities are great. And every choice you make to do fluff is time taken away from dealing with the hard choices you said you were running to tackle. And I'm with you. The United Nations, basically, this is a waste of resources, a completely corrupt institution that's never solved a security issue in its history. But if a president's going to choose to go, he ought to be meeting with serious people about serious issues. The only positive thing that seems to have come out of that entire exchange is that the administration was cowed away from what they had planned in terms of their meeting with Morsi. Right.
And the president cancels that. Now he says he's not going to meet with Mohammed Morsi. This is, it's all a mess. I'm not quite sure that the State Department could do anything that would help back us out of this, because they're not going to be more definitive. I don't think nothing's going to change until November. He's not going to be flexible, Stephen, until after November.
Right. Well, I am very fearful of what that flexibility might bring, and I'm also fearful that open mic night with Medvedev and Putin was not a limited episode, I'm a little bit astonished that the broader electorate isn't as concerned about the world really taking a terrible turn, and that has grave consequences no matter who's elected.
Absolutely. Stephen Yates, DC International Advisory, DCIadvisory.org. Stephen, it's always a pleasure to hear your expertise on these issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
Take care.